Hello everyone and welcome to the official SuperCoach AFL podcast. I'm Paton. This is the fourth and final positional show for the 2025 pre-season, and it's a big one because we need to talk about forwards. There's a few picks which are in a lot of teams, and after that it's very much up in the air. So very keen to hear the thoughts of our expert panel here to talk about forwards today. And joining me, first of all, welcome back Chloe, who's was on our ruck show last week. Chloe, happy to have you on to talk forwards.
Great to be back. Plenty of forwards to get through, so keen to have a chat about them. Absolutely.
And Tim Michell is with us again. Timmy, great to have you on board.
Hey, Al. Yeah, good to be back on board for 2025. And we're recording this just before the pre-season matches as well. So sure there'll be plenty to talk about the next couple of weeks as we get closer to the first bounce of the season.
Yep, that's definitely worth mentioning. And Patch, obviously normally on the show, but he's out with a 1 week injury, but we have a very capable replacement, the SCodfather himself, top 10, top 5 finisher in SuperCoach a couple of years ago, YouTube sensation. Welcome aboard. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me, and absolute pleasure. My first appearance, and this will be another one that I'm going to treasure forever. It'll be a memory I'm going to keep for the rest of my life.
Well, hopefully we get to live up to that billing, but we've got you on, before we get into some forward chat, how are you looking at thinking about the season? How's your team looking without going into too much detail at this stage? But you've just put out an absolute mountain of content over the pre-season. But I did see you had a video yesterday, something about Are You Confusion, I think it was called. So how are we feeling with so many players up for discussion?
I built a team, I deleted it, built another team, and then repeated that process 1,000 times. Okay, now I've passed the 1,000 time mark. And now my latest team's got no dollars left. The Spuds have taken it all, so it's all disappeared. So at the moment, I'm broke. I'm trying to find money. I can't find it. No banks lend me money. Nothing's happening.
Well, hopefully we might be able to find something today that can help you out. But we'll get into some forwards, and I thought we've used these on these positional shows, done a little bit of strategy talk before we get into some specific players. And really with the forward line, it's just a question of, do we just go full-on mid-price madness? There's actually quite a few good rookies. I think when we get to those, we'll get into them more. But there's some names that we could consider starting on the field. But there's not a lot of players that you would consider primos in the forward line. But of those sort of maybe 4 or 5, Tim, can I ask you how many have you actually got in your team currently?
Yeah, it's interesting, Al. I was pretty set when the game opened on going pretty hard at the forward line and trying to get probably sort of 4 or 5 that I thought could be there for most of the season. Talking about guys like Jason Horne-Francis, Isaac Rankine, obviously Caleb Daniel, who's just about the number 1 pick this year. And then Matthias Philippou was in that mix as well, and him getting injured sort of threw me a bit because he was sort of a great price point, and there's not too many options around his sort of 315K to go sideways to. So I've had to sort of think about what I'm going to do with F4 or F5. And then Jack Macrae as well looks a bargain at St Kilda too. So I was pretty happy to lock in those 5, and then I thought I'll just spend whatever money I've got on the rest of the premiums. But at the moment, I don't have Isaac Rankine. Just a little bit worried about his durability, but I'm just trying to find reasons not to pick him really because I want that extra midfield premium. But who knows, with all the midfield rookies that we've got on offer this year, maybe the forward line is the place to spend up and to go big.
Well, looking at my team, I sort of did another reshuffle on the weekend, and the thing that stood out to me was that the forward rookies are actually looking pretty good compared to even necessarily the midfield and maybe the back line where we normally can rely on having 2 or 3 good ones that you could start potentially on field. So now I'm thinking, does that limit how many of the primos or the mid-prices even in the forward line that I can pick, because you want to make sure you've got the right rookies? But where do you sit quickly on that one at the moment, Chloe?
So as per usual, I am unfortunately trying to squeeze in as many of those great forward mid-price options as possible, even so having one in my flex position currently. So I only have 1 premium as a result, but you're right, Al, some of those rookies are looking fantastic. I think at least the ones that I have in my team currently seem like, we'll have a look at the preseason games, but they seem like quite a high percentage to play as opposed to some other areas of the ground at the moment. But I do love those mid-price options. So at the moment, I'm sticking to a couple of those.
And Abs, how much of your bank has gone on the forward line, I should say?
Because the forward line is so cheap, a lot of my money's gone there. But at the moment, the thing is, it's all about scoring points in SuperCoach, and these mid prices, like you got players of the caliber of Macrae, Parker, Caleb Daniel. I mean, at their price, I'm going point per dollar, and they're bargains, and I've got to get them because I like to shop at the market, so they're good prices. So I've also snuck in Sanders somehow. I don't know how why I got him, but I have a feeling that Bevo's going to look after me this year and do good for me. So Sanders, so I've got 5. Last night I had 6, but I took Rankine out because the cash I was going to spend on Rankine, I was thinking about it. Maybe I could spend it on a midfielder. So I took that cash out of Rankine and put it towards the midfield. So I only got 5. Only.
Well, we want to start with we want to start there with Rankine because we've mentioned him a couple of times already, and he is one of those guys that you would consider a primo in the forward line. But I mean, Tim, what attracted you to him in the first place, and then is there a reason you're off, or is it just because you want to spend the money somewhere else?
Oh, I think it's just how quickly he scores points, Al. Like, we know that there's always the chance that a guy who spends a fair bit of time up forward can have longer periods of games where maybe he doesn't have a great number of disposals. But I think we saw within sort of 10 or 15 minute bursts, him put on 30 or 40 points last year, and he really showed the impact that he can have when he goes into the midfield for the Crows, and that he doesn't necessarily need to be like that 50-60% centre bounce midfielder that we're often looking for to score big points in SuperCoach. And I know he ended up averaging 97 last year, but you've got to factor in that includes a game where he scored 47 when he was injured too. So that would put that average up above 100 and would have him priced about the same as Jason Horne-Francis. So you might have had to pay maybe 20 or 30K more if Rankine hadn't been injured in that particular game. But I mentioned, and Abs has left him out as well. Yeah, he's sort of the one that I don't have out of the big dogs in the forward line at the moment, and pretty keen to see what the midfield split's like for the Crows. But yeah, there's plenty of reasons to be hot on Isaac Rankine this year, and I reckon, especially with the way that the Crows draw is early on, like they've got a pretty friendly sort of first 5 or 6 weeks. Rankine could explode out of the blocks and sort of state a case to be the F1 this year.
Yeah, I mean, Abs, what do you think about his role, and does he need to get those centre bounces to be a real premium scorer? Looking up the CBAs from the Crows last year, it was a very wide sort of, they had a lot of players go through there. Matt Crouch was number 1 with 67%, then you had Dawson on 59, Saligo 56, Laird 50, Berry 47, and then Rankine down on 38%. So is there a way you can leapfrog at least a couple of those guys this year?
Well, the news I've been hearing is that he's going to get close to 50, so we'll see how that goes. But if that's the case, he can go crazy. He can go, and his flexibility, the way he runs, the way he gets that ball, the loose ball gets, the tackles. He's actually he'll be F1 for sure. The thing with also Rankine is, as Tim mentioned, those quick 30 points. He gets a lot of those in the last 5 minutes of the game. He'll either kick a goal or he'll do something to win the game for them, or he'll get those quick bonus 40, 50 points. Because as a non-owner last year, I was watching him close because I was hoping he wouldn't score, right? So, and what I was noticing was these big scores were coming in, like 120s, 130s, when he was on 80. So he'll just go bang and get those massive points.
Yeah, he's definitely in consideration, but yeah, it's just a matter of could you get him at a similar price maybe later in the year, or is it best to get on early with that early fixture?
He's not going to go above 550K at any stage, is he?
I think for me as well, it's more so when you pick him in your forward line, obviously there should be that great output, especially if he's able to get those CBAs up. But it is one of those spots that you then can't use on one of those mid prices. So if someone like a Caleb Daniel could easily equal that total, then obviously it's pretty smart to go with the cheaper option. And then if Rankine's killing it, try and find a way to bring him in a bit further down.
Quickly, we should mention as well, so I think 4 games last year where he had 20 disposals or more. In each of those, I think he went above 120. So he had 27 against the Giants here, 121. Season high against the Lions was 142 SuperCoach from 24. And then, 23 and 30, he had sort of 121 and 125. So pretty much any time he hits that 20 disposal mark, he's going to score 115 plus, it seems like, because he's such a high impact player with his disposals. And Abs touches on a really good point as well, with just his ability to hit the scoreboard, even if it is late in games. There was only one game last year where Rankine didn't kick a goal. So you can just about rely on the fact that he's going to bob up and kick a goal at some stage as well.
Well, the player that a lot of people are choosing maybe between him and another forward primo. I've got 4 players here listed over 500K. We've got Luke Jackson and Dylan Moore there as well, but they're very low ownership, only 14 and 7%. Rankine's on 18% at the moment, but the most owned forward primo by a mile, 48%, is Jason Horne-Francis, so he's at 537K. I mean, Port Adelaide's midfield mix is an issue. I think, I've sort of famously haven't got him in my team at the moment. The Phantom keeps mentioning that on all their podcasts, but one of the reasons is that, where does he sit in the pecking order there at Port Adelaide when you've got Butters, Rosie, Wines and Drew were all ahead of him with CBAs last year, and those guys all, don't see them playing too many different roles this year. So, Abs, what's your thoughts on the Horny one, as they like to call him? Is he a lock for starting teams, or am I onto something by perhaps leaving him out and try and grab him at some stage later on?
Well, from what I've been hearing again, because these are all the news coming out, and what I've been hearing is his tank has improved. So the Horny man has a problem. Sorry, I did say Horny man, but that's what I called him the first time I was on your show, actually. But the Horny man does have a problem with his tank, and it's improved. So put a new engine on Horny, and he's going to go nuts. So I reckon his draw early is huge. He's going to play Richmond. He's going to play all these easy games. I can see him, toppling Rankine for sure. I can see that happening, and plus he has high impact, more than Rankine, because of his hard ball gets, his tackles. It just needed his output. If his attitude is right, we're going to have a big year from the Horny man.
I mean, last year, I'm really searching for reasons to justify not picking him, but in 21 games last year, he had 9 over 100. After the bye, 14 games, he only had 3 over 100. That's including finals. But is that something to worry about, Chloe?
I don't know. Personally, it's not enough to deter me, just because I think that he will take his game to another level this year. I did own him last year, which I think was just a year too early. I think what I expected of him last year is what I'm hoping that he can do this year. I went to Gather Round and saw him live, and I was like, no, I'm just going to blow up my whole team to fit him in, which didn't end up being smart. But I think starting him this year, I don't really have any doubts. I definitely think, with that added tank, and knowing that Ken apparently wants him to play full mid-minutes, if he can actually use that improved fitness to play full mid-minutes, then, I mean, he's bound to still pop up in the forward line anyway. Even in the finals, he popped up for a goal or two. So he does like to do that when it matters most, which is great for SuperCoach.
Yeah, no, can definitely have an impact forward. It's just, I guess, the matter of the mix and how they throw them together. I mean, I should mention that he averaged just under 100 last year, tick under 100 after 78 the year before. So, it's natural progression. How much can you bank on that? But obviously, number 1 draft pick. So, and he's that sort of Dangerfield style player. And if he does keep going and explode the way that we sort of expect he will, he might get out of reach. So that could be an issue for me. But any interest in any other of these, in inverted commas, primos before we move on to the all the juicy mid prices?
No.
Luke Jackson, Dylan Moore.
About any of them.
No, I think both of those guys will score well, but I don't really see a lot of value there.
Sean Darcy's not going to be there round 1L, but I'm pretty confident Reedy will play. He showed enough in those 2 games, and the Dockers like going in with 2 rucks. So it would surprise me if Liam Reedy didn't play with Luke Jackson early on. So that pretty much cancels him out because he needs to play as a sole ruckman to do anything. Dylan Moore was good, but again, I don't think he's going to get out of control. Like, he had some really good scores late last year, but if we're expecting John Newcomb and Will Day scoring and all these to lift by 5 or 10 points, maybe Moore's the one that sort of plateaus at that 100, 105 and just averages about what he did last year. You just got to remember on Horne-Francis as well, he was playing hurt towards the end of last year too and playing a lot of time forward. So that's definitely a factor in sort of his scoring drop-off in the second half of last year as well. I just can't see a world where what's he priced at, 99 or 100?
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to get much lower than what he's priced at right now. Like, he's on an upwards trajectory I think worst case he averages 95 and he loses 20k throughout the season or something. Like, I don't think you're going to get him much cheaper by leaving him out. And yeah, I think it makes sense to start him. But I can see why you're looking for reasons, Al. But yeah, I think I would not be shocked if in a couple of weeks' time he's in your team.
Plus, on the topic of Jackson, Streck's going to come back. The minute Streck comes back, then what are you going to do when you got Jackson? He's going to play some full forward. So you're virtually
he's irrelevant as soon as that happens. Yeah.
Yep, no, and you're right about Horne-Francis there. I'll probably cave at some stage, but I'm trying to hold out for as long as I possibly can. But we need to talk mid-prices because there's plenty of them and some of the most popular picks in SuperCoach so far. So I guess, how much time do we need to spend on someone like Caleb Daniel, who's already in 69% of teams? He averaged 49 last year, which is the worst of his whole AFL career. He was sub 8 times. He's gone to North Melbourne. We know he's got the license to just pig it out at halfback for them. So, yeah, I don't even know if I need to really say much more about him. Bailey Smith may be slightly more interesting. He's 67% owned, so extremely popular as well, coming back off an ACL last year. I guess some question marks maybe about what his role will be at Geelong. We sort of assume he'll just go straight into the midfield. He averaged 80 points a game in 2023, but that was on only 30% CBAs under Bevo, which is probably good for us in a way that we've got a forward mid DPP now. But he averaged 97 in 2022 or 54% CBAs, so surely he gets at least that, Abdul.
Well, Dan Paton just put up a little tweet today, and he mentioned that he's going to play inside mid, wing, and half forward, and that's pretty much the role I'm expecting him to play. And if you're going to have those three positions, your CBA probably looking around about that 50% mark, and that's going to pretty much match around about I'd say about a 90. Plus, at the Dogs, we had hardball getters inside, like you had the Bont, you had Libba getting the ball out, and he was a receiver. At Geelong, who are the hardball getters that are going to get that ball and give it to him? You don't have the Bont, you don't have Libba there. You maybe got Dangerfield, but he normally gets the ball and just kicks it anyway, so he doesn't usually dish it out to his the teammates. Plus, at Geelong, they play a different game. They play an attacking game from the back line, and they head forward long and direct, where at the Dogs, they would share the ball around. So I can't see Smith averaging more than 90. That's what I've got him at, and I've got him as an anti-pod.
So he's not in your team?
No, hasn't been in my team all year.
I'm finding this very interesting because I have been toying with the idea of also leaving him out of my team, as Al would know, as I was frantically making multiple changes yesterday and then deleting it and trying again. But one of those changes was going without Smith, mainly just because the price for me is a little awkward. So just with all the other value that's on the table this year, even some of the rookies who were expecting to do quite well, even in those higher hundreds prices, I'm thinking maybe that's where my money could be better spent, even if it's not quite matching that 90 that might be expected of Baz. That he might be able to, even if they can average 80, you could pretty much get 2 for the price of 1 in that regard. So I am too kind of shopping at the markets, but that's my main reason for wanting to leave him out. Yeah, I'm on team Antipod.
If you had to put a number on it, Tim, what are you expecting from Baz this year?
Yeah, I think Abs is probably close to. Like, I might be slightly more optimistic. I think he could average 95. I just think his ceiling is capped by the fact that his kicking is pretty average. I think his career average is about 52% disposal efficiency, which means that only 1 in every 2 kicks hits the target, essentially. And we know that can be criminal in SuperCoach and cost you a lot of points. So I don't think he's the type of guy that is going to break out and suddenly be a 110, 115 midfielder just because he's gone to Geelong and he's going to play a bit of extra midfield time, even if it is that he's going to play in some of these other roles. But I still like him at his price point. If we get him to average 95 and he ends up as F5 or F6, I think that'd be a reasonable outcome, and hopefully we do get better than that. He can push to 100 and 105. But yeah, I can understand why Chloe and Abs are looking at the option of leaving him out. But yeah, I think the safe play is definitely going to be to play him. And if he shows anything in pre-season, I expect him to be one of the highest owned players going into round 1 when SuperCoach kicks off.
Yeah, he's definitely one we'll be keen to see in action.
I looked at his average in 2022 and I got it at 98. he had a lot of games where he had 100% time on ground. He was virtually playing every minute. He wasn't off the ground. There was, I think most of them were 90 plus. He won't get that at Geelong. He just come off a 1-year injury. So if he goes at 80% time on ground, plus, as Tim mentioned, his disposal efficiency, he needs to get the ball 40 times, because 20 of those will be kicked properly. So it'll be hard for him to get that 100 plus. That's how I see it.
Well, yeah, with his kicking, I just think about him as an inside midfielder. That's a harder role to get decent kicks in and to hit targets in than playing as sort of that outside like he did at the Bulldogs. So who knows, maybe he'll turn his kicking around, but yeah, it hasn't been pretty to this point. And yeah, I think Abs makes a really good point too. The Cats are never afraid to manage players, especially like their more experienced players. They often sub Dangerfield out, or they'll sub Guthrie out late in the game just to limit their minutes and know that there's bigger challenges coming up. And it wouldn't surprise you after so long out of the game if Bailey Smith, let's say they're miles ahead in round 2 or round 3. I haven't looked at the buys closely enough to know if they're playing in those rounds, but it wouldn't surprise you if Scott just gave him a tap and said, look, mate, have the last 15 minutes on the bench and have a bit of a rest, and that potentially limit his scoring as well. But yeah, I think he's a great price. I'm still going to pick him, but there's some definite sort of potential red flags there.
Yeah, I mean, he's not playing in round 3, and that's another reason you might think about potentially passing on him if you can't fit them all in, because, we do have a lot of players potentially missing that round, so that could sort of solve a little bit of a problem if you don't pick Bailey Smith in the forward line. But, Chloe, what about the other ex-Dog? Jack Macrae's gone to the Saints. Surely there's no doubts over his role down at Moorabbin?
No doubts. He's at 61% owned. I'm not quite sure why that isn't telling me that he is 100% owned, because I've heard Dossie say it a couple times over on the Lair, and number one lock of this year, priced at only 73. And how consistent has he been apart from last year, really? How can you argue with that consistency?
But there's 31% of people that don't have Caleb Daniel. Like, people are idiots. Those 31% are anyway. Like, you're staring at two of the biggest...
I don't see him being 30 being an issue.
No.
Is he 30 turning 31, or is
we've had in a long
he turned 30? Yeah, I don't think it matters anyway, though, because, I can't be saying that that's old, because that means that Cripps is getting old, and then I have to start to be concerned about that. So, no. Some of the numbers just speak for themselves. So 2023 was obviously, everybody knows this already, his lowest average since his debut season in 2013. So being priced at that 73 price point, I think he's just going to be able to smash that pretty easily. It is a bit of pressure to put on him at that price to expect an 100 plus average, but I think he's definitely capable of that, and he's the kind of player that St Kilda have been crying out for. And then when Mateus Filippo went down, I guess that just even increases that responsibility too for him. I don't have any concerns at all.
Yeah, we had 12% CBAs last year, and this year, I mean, it's Jack Steele and then him, wouldn't you say, Abs?
Yeah, he's a very similar player to Matt Crouch. If you ever watch Matt Crouch, he'll just get that ball all the time. There's a loose ball get all the time. He just scores for fun. He'll get the ball hand pass, because his hand passes are deadly accurate. His kicks are accurate. He tackles. He has no flaws, except Bevo was his flaw. So that doesn't happen this year. So hopefully Ryan can keep him in the midfield, and he has to. There's nobody else. So I can see a 110 plus, and because, as Chloe mentioned, 99 was his worst average, and he was playing forward. So imagine when he plays in the midfield. So I can see a 110 plus.
Yeah, I love Jack Macrae. The next few names are a bit more interesting, because I think, a lot of people, we've got a couple here that are maybe going antipod on Bailey Smith, but a lot of people locking in Smith, Daniel and Macrae. But then you've got 2 or 3 other really interesting names around that sort of 300k price bracket. Unfortunately, no Mateus Filippo for the first part of the season anyway, but Luke Parker at 343k, 23% owned. Riley Sanders, we've mentioned briefly, 339k at 17%. Shea Bolton was in my team for a little while, 12%. He's over the 400k mark. But of these guys, can we fit in another one, Tim, or are we moving down to the rookies now?
Yeah, I'm well and truly not sold on Luke Parker. I saw him going into North Melbourne to play like more kind of half forward, bit of a goal kicker, kick 20, 25 goals, and pinch hit in the midfield, maybe play 10 or 20% midfield. I just don't see how he gets this regular midfield time that people are talking about when they've got a full complement of midfielders anyway. So George Wardlaw, no guarantee to be there round one because he's had his injury issues, but you've got him, like you've got Alder, you've got Sheasel, who's a midfielder now. There's your best three midfield. Luke Parker's not in that. And then you're going down to, you would expect that Clarko wants to expose Finn O'Sullivan at some point because he's going to be a midfielder. He's not just going to play on a wing his whole career. So he'll play CBAs at some point. Colby McKercher's in that mix as well. Yeah. Jai Simpkins in that mix. Like there's a hell of a lot of midfielders at North Melbourne, and
Will
for some
Phillips
reason they just keep drafting midfielders. So that's a whole other discussion point. But I think Luke Parker's midfield time's maybe not going to be as high as some people are hoping for. And I know that there's been good signs in pre-season that it might be up there. But yeah, I'm not as bullish on him playing as high a midfield time. Do I think he's underpriced? Yes. But I probably think he's underpriced by 10 or 15 points. I don't think he's underpriced by 30 points and suddenly going to go back to scoring hundreds. So, wish him well. And I think it'd be a decent pick for his price, but is he top 6? I don't think so. I think he's more sort of in that top 10, top 12 range maybe.
He averaged 96 or more for 10 years in a row before last year when he averaged 71 when he had only played 7 games, broke his arm, got suspended in the VFL, everything kind of went off the rails.
Played in a team that won a lot more games than North Melbourne as well to attract a lot more SuperCoach points. So I just don't know. I think there's a lot of roos in that team that are going to take points off him as well. How many of if they're not winning a lot of games, and let's say they win 6 to 8 games this year, how many of Sheasel, LDU, McKercher, Cherry, who scores 150 points every week, how many of these guys plus Parker can be putting up hundreds and 20s
Jack
every
Darling.
week? Like, there's only so many points that are going to go to losing teams.
I don't have the stats in front of me, Tim, but I know that last year, unless I'm making this up, it felt like North Melbourne, despite losing, would still have a relatively high time in possession, and they did like to pass the ball around to each other a lot by foot and by hand, which we know that they have done off their backline for a fair while, which has always been obviously not Parker's role, but a good scoring role at the Roos. But I think that could help his scoring, the way that they like to share the ball around. And just with that time in possession, this is just anecdotal evidence. As I said, I don't have any stats, but I think there were plenty of games where it was kind of that mid-forward connection that they were really lacking. So they would have plenty of the ball. It's just every time they would go into that forward line, they couldn't really score. But I think that they still had a decent time in possession. As I said, don't have it in front of me, but that is just kind of what I witnessed. I think with Parker in particular, he's gone in there for some experience as well, right? So they don't necessarily have the most experienced midfield. I think they would love to have him running around in there too, not just kind of helping out the younger guys on the sidelines, but also leading from the front on the field. Obviously, he won't play, a massive amount of time in the middle, like someone like a Jack Macrae, but I think it will still be decent enough, and he can impact going forward too. Was one of their best players really in the grand final, in my opinion. So I don't know. I'm pretty bullish on him. He's in my team at the moment. Hoping that he could get to 90 plus, and then anything above that would be great.
I'm actually with Chloe on this one. Okay, sorry, Tim, but I'm with Chloe on this one. And the way I see it, okay, North Melbourne, hard-bodied. We counted all those midfielders, okay? You mentioned all those midfielders. We're talking about hard-bodied midfielders now. And the main one is gone. Wardlaw, he was a machine. He's gone. Okay, he'll come back. But until he comes back, it's going to be Parker's job to get that hard ball and pass it off to these players that you were mentioning. Because players like, they don't want to, Sheasels is a good boy, okay, and he's a strong boy, but he's not a strong, they don't want to hurt him, okay? They want, if someone's going to get hurt, it's going to be Parker, and he's going to be that bull getting that hard ball out. So I could see Parker, at least for the first 4 or 5 rounds, until Wardlaw comes back, going maybe at 90-95. He's what we call a stepping stone, okay? So Parker is my ticket to get Rankine. So if Parker from 350K can go to 450K, then with that extra 50K on top, I'll just get Rankine. So he's like a stepping stone.
Yeah, don't mind that. So what about Sanders? How does he fit into the plans?
with Sanders, I've actually did a review for him, and I actually love his role now, because I looked at at the Western Bulldogs midfields. They got nobody. Okay, you look at Libba. Okay, now Libba maybe get that, but he's had all these concussion issues. So I think you're going to make him. He's not going to. Maybe he'll spend time in there. All right, but with Treloar out, you need that player on the outside to pass, to give it to. Okay, and now that they've got this young boy. We saw him last year. He actually averaged 90 as a midfielder, and he hardly played there. So I can see him. He's probably the fourth or fifth midfielder, maybe the fourth at the Dogs right now. And I can see him going at 90 if he's given the time by Bevo, if Bevo looks after him. So we've got the Bevo factor. It's a gamble, a huge gamble. He's also a stepping stone. Okay, so again, another one that's not a keeper, but you can upgrade him. Maybe to Petrarca. When Petrarca gets a forward DPP, you just make the switch. So he's going to be another upgrade target, just as a stepping stone for now. But
So Riley Sanders, obviously we're talking about 339K. He's a forward mid. He's in 17% of teams, so there's a bit of love out there for him. Definitely the Doggies are giving him some love on their social accounts over the preseason. He's looking pretty good in some of their match simulations, so we'll see what happens when we get some real practice matches. I think they play on the weekend, so it'd be great to have a look at him. He was picked 6 in the 2023 draft, obviously, so this is only his second year, but he averaged 63 last year. He was the sub 4 times. They put him back to the VFL, and he just put up absolutely monster numbers. And, Treloar out, obviously, creates a bit of an opening in the midfield. But, you did mention the Bevo factor. So it's just, how brave are we to go there? Tim, is he in your team?
He's been in and out. And, it's predominantly down to that Luke Beveridge factor. And then Brendan Lade comes out and says that they want all their players to have flexibility and that they see Sanders as a guy who can go to half forward and have an impact. And that's less than ideal when you hear assistant coaches saying stuff like that. But maybe they're just red herrings and they're trying to throw us off. I think with these guys like Parker and Sanders, just because of their price, like Ab said, they don't have to do a lot in the couple of preseason games that we might see to convince us to start them. Like, we don't want to be too reactive to what we see over a couple of games, but at their price, like at the worst case scenario for us, if they say start slowly, they're only going to need 1 or 2 games to spike, make that 80 to 100K that Abs is talking about, to turn them into stepping stones, and then they're your avenue to a couple of big premiums. So I think, both of those guys, they're not in my team at the moment, but if I see even a slight sign that there's an increase in midfield time or sort of a good role there, I'll probably end up with them in my team to start with.
Yeah, I think all of these guys are probably going to outscore what they're priced at. It's just a matter of by how much and how quickly and what you can do with them. And obviously, Abs has a plan for what he's going to do with all of these guys. But unless there's anyone else in that sort of mid-price bracket that I've missed, if we go down to the bit of rookie chat to finish off, and there's plenty of names here that I find really interesting who could potentially be good picks for us. Out of all that bracket, Chloe, who do you like at the moment from a rookie point of view in the forward line?
I do have Elijah Hewitt at the moment. So he did not play last year, and I'm pretty keen on him this year, as long as he's able to keep those injury woes behind him. I'm sure Dossie would have a lot more knowledge about him than I myself would, but I've just heard good things about him and playing midfield minutes apparently, so that's what we love, isn't it?
Yes, 100%. Abs, who's at the top of your, have you got Elijah Hewitt, and who else do you like in that rookie bracket?
I've got Davidson, but before I mention Davidson, there's another young boy that everyone's talking about. I don't know much about him, so maybe you guys can help me out here, but it's Marriage at West Coast. His price around about 250K. From what my friends are telling me now, right? My friends, okay, they're telling me that he's taking the kick-ins. Now, obviously, it's probably in a practice game. I've seen some photos of him. He looks like the Hulk. Okay, he looks as big as me. Okay, so he's very strong. So, but I'm not sure what he can score. Is he going to be another like the fish? Take the ball, run, get the ball. Is he going to be one of these big scorers? So it's going to be interesting to watch him in the preseason.
Tim, I don't know if you want to jump in there because you were keen on another, I think, West Coast player around a similar price range.
Yeah, there's a couple of Eagles that I like. Marriage is a good shout. I sort of have my doubts about how many kick-ins Jeremy McGovern's going to let him take, though. Like, Gov just absolutely ate all of them up last year, and I reckon at some point he's just going to go, I'm the senior player here. I'm going to pull Rankine on all the kick-outs. So that'll be an interesting watch during the season. But, yeah, I'm keen to see Jack Hutchinson. He's been the mid-season drafter. He's been training on a wing from all reports. So it looks like he's going to play a bit further up the ground than where he was initially drafted to play under Andrew McWalter. He's only 1% owned at the moment, and I guess if we look at his most recent outing, it was against Geelong in a pretty heavy loss in round 24, and Jared Schofield stuck him in the midfield, scored 102 SuperCoach playing as a midfielder. He had 24 disposals and 6 clearances, so the signs are there that when he plays a bit further up the ground, obviously a mature age guy being drafted out of the VFL where he was playing for Collingwood, that he could potentially be one that is sort of well below his price. I can see him averaging sort of 70 to 80 playing on that wing, and maybe potentially even a bit of inside mid-time as well. So, yeah, he's another Eagle that I've definitely got my eye on.
Can I just play devil's advocate for a second? Sorry.
No.
With Hutchison. I mean, I don't know. I'll admit that I don't know a heap about him, but I suppose we are just really going off that one really good score. At his price, there's obviously not a lot to lose, but I remember watching that game and it was not at all close to one of the best games I saw in the year. I would almost say it was one of the worst, apart from Carlton losing, of course. It's almost like maybe Geelong took their foot off the pedal for him to be able to score that much. And their midfield, obviously, we know is pretty easy to score against. At least it was last year to a certain extent. So I would just bear that in mind when looking at him.
Yeah, and also you read into a round 24 blowout. That's a fair call.
And also with these 250k players, which again goes to my marriage pick, you want them to score minimum 80 to make that 150k, and anything below that, and it's a loss. Plus, you're losing 100k. Sorry, my TV's going off. All right. Plus, you're losing 100k from upgrading another player because you've spent so much money on one player just to make 150k extra. That 100k you could have spent elsewhere goes missing. So it sort of puts your team down unless this player you pay for 250k for can go. I'd say 90 would be the right amount. Even 80 is not enough. How do you feel about that?
But this is that whole debate, Al, that we've been having in recent years of like SuperCoach trending more towards players that play behind the ball as opposed to like looking for more midfield minutes. So you got Hutchinson that drafted as a forward, looks like he's going to play more on a wing, maybe some inside mid. Marriage at pretty much the same price, going to play behind the ball. I think if it came down to picking one of those two, you'd almost go for the player that plays behind the footy now, wouldn't you? Uses the ball well, going to get a few intercepts, going to get a lot of kick-ins. Like that ticks a lot of boxes for a guy
the kick-ins especially.
Average that 80 that Abs talks about.
Yeah, kick-in. If you know that he's getting some kick-ins, that's a sort of a bit of a safety net, really. That at least it gives you a bit of something to build on every week. Whereas who knows with the midfield, and as Chloe sort of touched on the Eagles, how competitive are the Eagles mid's going to be most weeks. Is a pretty big question mark. You mentioned another mature age recruit, Sam Davidson. Abs, keen on him?
He's going to play in the wing, from what I'm hearing. Also,
the
maybe
wing?
half forward.
Is he a forward?
He's very quick. He's very agile.
Can he play ruck? Can we free up Tim English?
If he played for Richmond, maybe he can. But I'm hearing he's going to play wing half forward. That's what the Wolf told me this. So the Wolf is pretty accurate. And from all reports, he's doing really well, and he's going to play round 1, from what I'm hearing. So he's a lock.
Yeah, and I like him. I like him as well on the bench. Obviously, won the Fothergill round medal. There's got another name in there too in the VFL on the last year for the most promising young player in the VFL.
Snub Sam Mitchell in the Fothergill round Mitchell medal.
Sorry,
Snub the Hawthorn coach.
And you look at the past winners of that, and it's like Luke Ryan, Nick Newman, Sam Closey. So, they've all had a pretty good SuperCoach pedigree. So hopefully Bevo gives him a run. And to me, he just seems like, Bevo loves his Anthony Scotts, his Lockie McNeil, these sort of guys out of the VFL, and he plays them and gives them a role. So hopefully
if you get drafted from the VFL, you're just about guaranteed 20 games at the Western Bulldogs.
Yeah, I like that. So that's Bevo. We know Bevo has his quirks, but that's one thing we can usually rely on him for. So, I've definitely got Sam Davidson in my forward line and potentially someone you could start on field. We'll see how he goes in the preseason. What about Isaac Kako, who's picked 13 in the draft last year, 149 So, not as cheap as some of these other guys. Forward mid, though, he's 50% owned. And the thing I just do like about him is I think given that Essendon have been screaming out for a player like this for a long time, I just think he's going to play every week and hopefully won't be the sub either.
Yeah, I think we'll get some volatile scores, won't we, Chloe and Abs, because he's a small forward, and who knows how Essendon to go this year. They've sort of seemingly gone back, not back to the drawing board a little bit, but they seem happy to take a couple of steps back to potentially sort of then launch and make themselves a premiership contender. So I'm sure there's going to be games where he scores 30 or 40, but looks really exciting and doesn't just rely on goals from all we hear to score points as well. And with the DPP, I think he's a pretty easy selection with the doc up forward.
It's also a matter of team balance, because finding that 140K sometimes can be the hardest thing to do. Like, I can't find it. I can't even find, actually, it's nearly 150K. Yeah, so to pay 149K or 150K, and if he's going to score 40s and 30s, maybe a couple of the odds 60 or 70, if there are better options, I'd go for the better options, to be honest, because it's a lot of money to spend. And at Abs Magic, we're pretty tight. Okay, we don't like to splash the cash.
Yeah, I don't have him in my team either at the moment, mainly for that same reason. But there is a lot to love about him, especially the DPP. But the price is just, it's a bit awkward for me at the moment. I am, in terms of my whole team structure, I'm still weighing up whether it is worth spending more money on my bench or not at the moment. But I'm trying to strip it back a bit at the moment to get those points on field. But I guess the benefit of someone like a Kako is that he's definitely going to play at Essendon. So especially when you get to the bye rounds, it's always good to know that you've got some warm bodies there, or even just some cash generation waiting on the sidelines for you. But yeah, I'm not expecting, pretty much what you said, Tim, I'm not expecting really consistent scoring from him just based on his role.
So they got the round 4 by Essendon, so you could potentially cop one price rise as well and get him in after that if he had started really well. And let's say, I know the round 0 factors into the price changes, but we don't count it in SuperCoach, so you got to look at him as well. I think with Essendon playing round 0, so pretty easy one if you want to sit and wait and make a judgment call after the bye in round 4 for Essendon.
I mean, he could be a handy loophole on that bye round if we've still got most of our players playing, but because losing him from your best 18 is probably not a big hit. So, but whether that's worth spending the extra money for, I mean, Abs, who have you found who's a bit cheaper than that?
I found
maybe
one
a forward bench.
I've been shopping at Victoria Market this morning, and I've sort of found one, but I'm not sure if he's going to play or not. It's from St Kilda, and it's a tall defender in Barrett, and now, I'm not sure how the St Kilda backline stocks are at the moment, but if any tall man goes down, Barrett possibly could go in. I've been watching a bit of Saints TV, so I was sort of listening to all the goss. And they're highly praising Barrett, but he's not going to be a huge scorer either. So probably going to score as maybe a 50 or a 60, but he's only 113K, but he's only going to be on the watch list if he plays. So he's probably needing an injury to happen before he can come in.
Who are we talking about here? I'm not even familiar with
James
this.
Barrett.
James Barrett.
Yeah.
Wow. Second or third round draftee last year. Abs has plucked one from absolutely nowhere.
Well,
I don't think that he would play, if I'm being honest, but if you've heard word otherwise, then I would definitely back that in.
That'd be a good segment, Al. Yeah. Just your most random pick.
Yeah, that's out there.
I had to go to aisle 3 in the Victoria Market to find him, right? So it wasn't easy.
This is
another one who's
that middle aisle of Aldi, Abs.
Yeah,
we just find him amongst all the garden supplies and the toiletries and everything else that are just thrown in together.
I mean, another one who's a forward in SuperCoach who's been talked about, who might play a bit of defence, is Connor Stone at the Giants. High draft pick from a couple of years ago. Hasn't played too many games, sort of has been the sub a lot. I mean, it wasn't Essendon into him in the trade period, and the Giants didn't want to let him go. So that maybe tells you something. And they've had a lot of outs there at GWS, so maybe there's a role for him in defence.
Well, he's been training there pretty much all year, and he had a little article about him. I'm not sure, actually, I might have read it in one of your posts. So there's a little article about him, and he was saying that he's been practicing a new role, and pretty much GWS has lost a few defenders. So I'd say he's a big chance, but they do have a bit of competition there. So there's another player that's going to play in our back lines that might get that spot. So it depends which one they pick.
I reckon if you're shopping in that 113K price range, Al, you're probably looking at like an Aiden Johnson from Melbourne, mature ager that comes in from Werribee, and Jay Clark's reported a few times during this pre-season that he's right in the mix for round one. Sort of might potentially partner Jacob Van Rooyen up forward for the Ds, so you want to keep him in mind. And the word out of Arden Street's pretty promising about Matt Whitlock as well. Like, they moved around some pieces, didn't they, in the draft, I think, to get him into their team. So clearly they rate him pretty highly. And I think he's been playing in defence since he arrived. He's still a young tall, so we might not see him early on, but definitely one to keep in mind for some stage during the year too. He's also only won 13K, so he might be another one to consider if he impresses during the pre-season.
And he's a deaf forward, which has become a bit of a recent SuperCoach tradition to pick a North Melbourne deaf forward. Not as many of them around this year, but has been handy. I can't
see many below that. Like Job Shanahan, apparently going okay, but does he start at West Coast? I wouldn't have thought so. I've seen a few people picking Tom Sims as well. Like, I know that Richmond is really lacking in bodies, but he's not going to play early, is he? Like, if you're picking
I think he's more of a loop.
You're probably picking him as a loop.
Yeah, I think he's on people's ruck benches, which I don't know where they've got Harry Boyd, but I think just in terms of that DPP, he's probably just people's.
What do you guys think about Neil Erasmus? Because he's a similar price. So he's about 5K more than the guys we're talking about. I just cannot get around this. So Justin Longmuir is shown in the last couple of years. Like, he has a very set preferred midfield mix that he goes to in almost every game. He goes to Brayshaw, he goes to Sarong, and now he goes to Hayden Young. Now he's in there full time. Like, why wouldn't you go to those three? Because they're all in probably the best 20 or 30 midfielders in the comp. So prefers those three to start. Then it was someone like Fife goes in. Yeah, who knows how much longer his time as part of that midfield mix is there. But you've got Shea Bolton, who you assume is going to go in there at some point. Switkowski does a bit of midfield work as well. I feel like...
Your boy, Matty Johnson?
Yeah, Matty Johnson as well, that I know our friend Damo SuperCoach rates very highly. So I just think Neil Erasmus is so far down that midfield pecking order, and as good as his Waffle Final series was, and we all want to sort of jump on the most recent performances that we've seen from a player. Like, I think best case scenario is in the team at sort of half forward, and I haven't seen anything from him yet to suggest that he's the type of guy that is going to score well enough playing in a variety of roles. I think we need him playing as a centre bounce midfielder if he's going to score well. And even then, when I think there was a game late in the season where he had 50% CBAs last year and he scored 40 odd SuperCoach. So it wasn't necessarily the most exciting performance anyway. So yeah, that's one selection I think people are getting wrong at the moment.
Yeah, and I actually agree with you. I can't even see Bolton getting in that midfield.
No.
The way Freo structured their midfield, it's only the 3 or 4 players, and that's about it.
That's exactly right, Abs. Yeah. They just go to those big 3. They all play about 90% game time, apart from Hayden Young when he gets his rest every now and again. But yeah, Brayshaw and Sarong are in there pretty much all the time, and Neil Erasmus isn't going to shift those guys out. We're talking about potential all-Australian midfielders here. So he's at best a 4th or 5th midfielder and probably further down the pecking order than that.
And they brought Murphy Reid in as well, who I haven't heard heaps about in the pre-season, but you would presume looking in the long-term picture that they would probably prefer to add someone like him into the midfield, or
Luke Jackson's been training as a midfielder, hasn't he? Apart from his ruck work, like, he's spent time training as a midfielder too. So they're clearly looking at sort of other potential options to freshen up their midfield as well. And I don't think Erasmus is certainly the answer. So I hope he goes well, and I hope it works out for the people that pick him. But the gut feel is he might be one of those guys that's like a great waffle play. He might be one of those like in-betweeners, and maybe it's based on role. Maybe if he went into another team and was playing as a centre-bounce midfielder, he'd be great and he would score that 80 or 90 that we hope, but I just can't see it happening at Freo.
Yeah, I
sounds like
I agree.
A big sub-risk if he does play too, which he was
that as well.
A few times last year. And a couple of names that we haven't mentioned that we should just quickly touch on before we wrap things up, but sort of do qualify in the rookie category, even though they're obviously much older. Tom Lynch is in 31% of teams at $183,000 or just over, and Sam Powell-Pepper is in 21% of teams. He's 180K as well, both forwards in SuperCoach. Any interest in these guys, Abs?
It's the price. They're top shelf. I go to bottom shelf, so I can't afford. It's impossible because you got at 180K. If I go to these gun midfielders, you can get anyone that's going to be a star for 180K. These two, what are they going to average? I mean, Powell-Pepper, is he going to play in the midfield of Port Adelaide? We're trying to squeeze in all these midfielders at Port Adelaide as well. They've got the same problem. He could be a sub-risk. With we're talking about Lynch. He's just had his great-grandchild, his grandpa, okay? So he's very old. So I can't see Lynch kicking a bag of 7-8 goals. He's not playing for the Richmond Premiership team. He's playing for a team that's hardly going to get the ball down there. So
I don't know, Abs. He loves playing against Carlton. He loves playing against Carlton. He's always got a big... him and Dusty have always got big round ones in them.
He will definitely whip out a big game for round one, but I think the main thing, Al, you could probably speak to this a bit more, but I mean, I guess I said something similar with North. It was maybe not to as big of an extent with Richmond, but I think they definitely had the problem last year of getting the ball forward and then just losing possession because they had nowhere to go. So I think there's been a bit of progression as well in some of those linking players like a Seth Campbell or a Ryan Mansell that I think Tom Lynch will be able to get the ball, even if he's literally just not running around very much, kind of just standing still. I think he has a couple of bags in him. He is in my team at the moment, but I totally see what you mean about him not being the player that he used to. I mean, if he gets on the park, that's a win at this point, right? So I think he definitely has some of those big scores in him, but he will, if you're buying him, expect some low ones too, I would say.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And it'll be timing. Like you need him to get maybe 3 good ones in a row and, make a bit of money and then you could probably offload him and, you look at Richmond's draw and every game seems hard because, we're not very good.
Yeah, if he kicks 3 big ones in a row, sell him straight away. Don't hesitate. Okay, as soon as you make 100K cash, you've got to get rid of him because it's going to go back down again.
But could it be like what I said about Kako though? So he has. You don't start him. He has one big game, and then you go, okay, there's the cash gen starting. So I'm prepared to burn a trade to get him in. But then I know that the risk is that he then comes out and scores 20 the next week. So you want to try and ride that cash train. But, maybe that is a bit risky.
I don't think scoring 20 is the risk either with him. I think it's just like not getting playing.
Getting injured, yeah, that's true. I mean, I think in the preseason, if obviously we want to see him out there, he did have a really good preseason up until a week or so ago when he copped, I think, like a knee to the head at training. Might have been from Jacob Kaczynski, one of the bigger things he's done since he's come to Richmond. But hopefully that only is a little minor setback, and we get I'd love to have a look at him in the Amy series or whatever we have now. And ideally, to Chloe's point, you'd want him sort of playing centre half forward and the long kick down the line, he's the one contesting on the wing or, half forward, that kind of thing. If he's stuck in the goal square, it could be a very long year because, it's going to be a struggle for the Tigers this year, I think. But, Tim, you put out on Twitter that we were going to be talking about forwards and you got a few replies. Was there any other players there that you think we can touch on before we wrap things up?
A couple of good questions about Hugo Garcia, your boy Al, and the Saints giving us reason to be bullish about him as well. I think they put up a social media post a couple of days before we recorded this talking about Hugo and his tackles and showing that he's bulked up a bit as well, which you would expect from a young player that spent a summer in the gym. So we know that when he came on as sub, like his points per minute were really good last year. And then just unfortunately for one reason or another, Ross Lyon decided that he was better to spend most of the second half of the season at Sandringham. So hopefully he can break in and be a regular in the 23. And you'd think with some of the injuries already around St Kilda that, especially if some of these midfielders aren't right to go in round one, that Garcia is the type of guy that could potentially break in and play a bit of half forward and potentially get some midfield time as well. So he's, again, we're talking about sort of 180K guys maybe being a bit too expensive. He's about 245, I think. Yeah. So he's not exactly a great price. Like if you're picking him, you're not picking Hutchison or Marrick, like you're picking one of those three probably. But yeah, Garcia, we know he ticks a lot of boxes in SuperCoach, tackles a lot, wins his own ball, kicked a few goals as well. So looks an exciting prospect, but I think his price is probably going to be a bit awkward unless he's 60, 70, 80% midfielder in the preseason, and then we can think seriously about him.
Yeah, 100%. We need to see the role for sure. Anyone else? I do like him though as a player. I think I'd be.
I know you're talking about him a lot.
Happy for the Saints to give him more of a crack, because what he showed last year was pretty good in just very small doses.
Have we mentioned that Port Adelaide rookie? What's his name?
Barry.
Joe Barry.
No, we haven't yet, but he's definitely on the radar for sure.
Yeah, he was pink, I think he was pink cap in the most recent session, which is probably just that, as Phantom says, like we panic a lot at this time of year over players on light duties and stuff, but he's been there for a couple of months. Like, not a surprise to see a draftee on light duties into his first preseason. The other bolter for me is Matt Jefferson, who was in the A team at Melbourne training at the most recent session. apologies if you're listening to this a bit closer to the season, but yeah, one of the most recent sessions in early Feb. So I spoke about Aiden Johnson, and he's probably in direct competition with Jefferson for a spot to partner Jacob Van Rooyen in the D's attack as well, and Jefferson might just have edged ahead. So he's another one worth considering too. He kicked 27 goals in 19 VFL games last year, so worth keeping an eye on too.
What's Jefferson worth? Let me have a look. Jefferson. Actually, he's cheap, 119.
I think he's a better chance than James Barrett of playing.
I've locked him on my team now. Locked him in.
Forwards are meant to be easy, Al. Forwards are meant to be easy. We're meant to be able to pick 5 big dogs, a rookie, and that would do it. But there's a lot. This Philippou thing has just completely made us rethink, hasn't it? I think it's amazing how one injury can sort of completely change your plans.
Yeah, I think we are blessed this year that we got all these cheap forwards that sort of made up for all these rookies that we don't have to have. So it sort of fill up our lines with all these cheapos, which is a good thing sometimes.
Yeah. I think the thing that sort of thrown me a little bit, as I've mentioned, is just I think there's actually quite a lot of good rookies here, and just see how they come along in other parts of the ground. And if we don't get Josh Smiley and these sort of guys, if Levi Ashcroft's not ready for round one, then maybe we need to load up in the forward line a bit more. And but then can we fit in all these other mid prices and bargains that we want to pick down there?
What are you going to do when Levi's a forward in round 6, Al?
I was going to say that, in round 6, you're going to have a lot of these rookies that we've got in our midfield that may actually go to our forward line, so we can maybe do a switch.
And Petrarca, abs.
Or even Marshall. If he plays a bit of forward time, might get Marshall, Petrarca.
Harry Boyd.
Boyd. You can get Langford maybe from Melbourne. He might play a bit of forward time. We don't know, so we'll get a few of these.
Book in a DPP's podcast.
Yes, well, I know. Tim's already. I think done a heap of research on potential DPPs for who might get that first change before we have even got any stats to work off at all. But we'll get that out soon. So keep an eye on obviously all the platforms for all your SuperCoach content. Plenty out there. Lots for SuperCoach draft as well, which we're getting into. And as we build up to these practice matches, so next week we'll be into sort of regular programming on the podcast with the Lair on Monday, and we'll have a brand new show on Wednesdays out of Melbourne, so can't wait for that with a big guest to kick us off.
You on that, Chloe?
Can't get much bigger than the SCodfather. So, Abs, thanks for coming on today. Where can people see all your amazing preseason content?
Well, if you go on YouTube and type in Spuds, I'll pop up. Just type in Spuds and you'll find me. And
Potato Farmer Melbourne. Google that.
Brilliant. Chloe, thanks for coming on.
No worries. Thank you for having me. It's definitely given me a few extra names to consider for my forward line.
Yeah, it's just what we need. More names. And Tim, great to have you back on board.
Yeah, thanks, Al. I'm off to Google James Barrett and work out who he is.
Yeah, good point. Me too. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and we'll catch you very soon.